Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well today, and that you had a good night's sleep, all those kind of things. Man, every once in a while we try to get to bed early, and early for us, 8:30, something like that would be early, and man, it was good. So we did that. I did a little work yesterday. Did a little work on ULA. Did a little work on just some ministry stuff I got going on. Wrote some emails. Watched. Welcome to Earth with Will Smith on Disney Plus. It really is one of our new favorites. There's only like 6 episodes, so we're just kind of, like you do a piece of, candy. You kind of eat just a little bit at a time. We didn't want to binge on the whole thing, but man, everyone is just fascinating with the creativity of our God, and it's not a Christian thing at all. But you can't help but see God in these things, and I'm telling you, you're missing out if you're not looking at these and wonder about who God is. They're rich. Yesterday was about speed and the way things travel, and he was with a camera guy, photographer that was trying to capture speed. And just slow things down so you could see what was happening. It's amazing what happens when you take things that are really slow, like just sand being blown across the desert, and then you speed it up, and what you see, and then when you take things and slow them down, and what you see when that happens, amazing, totally amazing, worth the watch. It's about a 43-minute deal. I don't get any money for that, obviously. I just am passionate about it. Go watch it. You can thank me later in that sense. So we are today in the book of Acts, flipping a page to chapter 9. So we're moving along at a decent pace, and here we are. And so we're in Acts chapter 9 now. Everything begins to flip at this point. There's certain hinge marks in the book of Acts. And just so we're clear, the book of Acts is kind of a transitory issue. You've got the old covenant and Judaism and all of that, and that was really the staple philosophical and religious practice of the Jews, and they're longing for a Messiah. That's the whole point of the Old Testament, was that there would be a Redeemer that would come and that would care for their sins. And so Christ came. They crucified him, didn't believe him to be the Messiah, and when Christ was resurrected from the dead, the new covenant was established. And so we see the beginning of that at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit comes down, ushering in really a mystery and a new work, a new covenant. Is based on the finished work of Christ, of his atoning sacrifice, the once-for-all sacrifice. Sin now no longer holds penalty over us or power over us who have believed and who have repented. And so there's a transitory issue that's taking place. So now, in the middle of Jerusalem, the seat of Israel, you have a new religion forming. I don't like the term religion, but just because it's clear and it's easy for us to understand. So now you have Judaism, and then you have what's called the Way. They will eventually call it Christians in Antioch, and they mean these terms in derogatory ways. Christian means little Christs, and so it's really kind of mockery of the Christian faith. Oh, they're the little Christs, right? And so the Christian, that's what that means. The Way means, oh, they think they've found the new way, because they kept calling themselves Jesus is the way, the truth, the life, right? And so now you have what's ripe is upheaval, right? Because you've got now two factions seeking to win the hearts and minds of the Jewish people. And then not just the Jews. For the gospel, they're learning, oh, it's not just for Jews. The Samaritans have come to Christ. I guess God means for them to be a part of the kingdom also. And then they're going to find that, oh, well, the Ethiopian, he came to Christ. So I assume it's for Africa as well. And then we're going to see in a bit, oh, the Gentiles come to Christ. I guess God means for this thing to go to the whole world, which, hello, that's what he said. You should be my witnesses to Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of, and the uttermost parts of the earth. And so we're seeing that develop. And so that's what's going on. Now, persecution, because of these two divisions in that sense, strife is happening. It's only going one way. The Jews are persecuting the Christians. The Christians, they just want to invite the Jews to join the party. That's all they're doing. Hey, man, join us. The Messiah has come, and he will come again. But we're establishing a kingdom. Come join us in this endeavor. and so this is not like a battle. It's not like they're warring with each other. There's one at war. One has the truth. One has missed it. And so there's a war. So they didn't like what Peter and John were doing, so they just give them a tongue lashing. Hey, you got to stop what you're don't you preach that stuff anymore. Peter and John go, hey, man, you have to decide what you want to do with us, because we have to decide, are we going to obey you or what God has charged us with? And we're going to go with God. And so they gave him a tongue lashing, sent him out. Happens again. This time they're beaten. And then the third time that we see this thing happen was last week, or yesterday rather, with Stephen and him having been preaching in their territory in the synagogues, and they're upset about that, and so they bring him before the court. He begins to condemn them through the gospel, explaining to them how they were the blasphemers of God, not he. They were the blasphemers of Moses, not he. They were the blasphemers of the temple, not he. And so he assaulted all of that. They stoned him. Now, when they did that, there was one man named Saul, and that's where this story now takes us. And we know him as Paul. This is no mystery to us. But his Hebrew name is Saul. And so we know from Scripture, before we jump into chapter 9, let me just give you some backstory, because there's a whole lot about this that I kind of want to bring in today as quickly as we can to make some understanding. Saul, of his own words, says that he was a Hebrew of Hebrew. He was born of the tribe of Benjamin, which is kind of a prestigious tribe in their culture in those days. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. That means that he was taught by Gamaliel, one of the chief scholars and individuals in the Jewish faith. He sat right up under Gamaliel, and there he is. And so you see him doing that. He's also Greek educated, because his father was a Jew living as a Hellenistic Jew in Tarsus. He grows up in Greek culture. So he's been learning the Greek philosophies. He's been learning all that the Greeks were teaching. He's learning that. He turns 13. He's now a student of Gamaliel. That's how you become a Pharisee. And so this is where he is. He's from Tarsus, which is north. It's in the Syria, Turkish area. This is who he finds him. This is where he finds himself. Now, Acts chapter 7, we just saw, Saul oversaw the murder of Stephen. Right? It says that they laid their cloaks at the feet of a young man named Saul as they stoned Stephen, and he perishes. Now, most would say that when they laid the cloaks at his feet, that meant that he was like the guy in charge, not like, oh, he's the little boy, so here, hold my coat, let me go do the fight. It was that those kind of leaders don't get their hands dirty in this. They're giving the orders. And so Saul gave the orders to persecute Stephen, and because he'd been chasing him anyway. So here's an opportunity. Great. Yes. And so he is with them in that murder. Acts chapter 8, verse 3, this is where we left off. Acts chapter 8, verse 3, it says that Saul is ravaging the church. He's just lighting it up. He's chasing them everywhere. It's bedlam. I want us to be clear about what this looks like, what it feels like. He's dragging people out from house to house, men and women, dragging them out, taking them to prison. He is adamant. He's a staunch Jewish individual. Does not know who Jesus is. Doesn't believe him to be the Messiah, though. And is going to root out this evil out of his culture that he knew. It would be much like living in the days of World War II with the Gestapo. And if you're a Jew and they're dragging you out, and so you see the Gestapo coming through, the brown shirts and all of that, and they're just coming into your home and they're trying to find out if you're a Jew or not, and they're dragging you out. And the bedlam that was ensuing in that world war, it's not that much different than, and we don't see it, and the news doesn't show it. But several years ago, They were writing the letter N in Aramaic on houses. That meant that they were Nazarenes. That simply meant that they were Christ followers. And then the Ayatollah was having all of the Christians pulled out of the streets, and either they repented, pulling out of the houses, and they either repented or they were killed. It was bedlam in the Middle East. And we can't appreciate what's going on, but this is what's happening here. This is no peaceful little incursion of words. This is murder. This is beatings. This is throwing in prison because you have sided with Jesus and you're a part of the way. Are we clear on this picture? We have to see it this way. Now, we come to chapter 9. And man, this is good. So we're going to look at 9 verses today, and I would just want to, it's a story. I love narrative. We're just telling a story. Are we finding points in there? Yeah, there's some theological truths that we can dig out of here. But it's important for us just to know our history and know where it came from. So there's a man named Saul, still breathing threats and murders against the disciples of the Lord. Breathing. That means that's his appetite. He lives for this, right? Man, if someone says, man, you breathe and sleep basketball, don't you? Or you breathe and sleep, whatever. It means that's your priority. That's all you care about. Here we read in the text that the priority of Saul, this incredibly bright Pharisee, keeper of the law, he says, I kept it spotless. I didn't miss one iota. And he's still breathing threats and murder. He's just living to threaten these Christians and intimidate them and to see them killed against the disciples of the Lord. So he's going after them. Now, we're not just talking about apostles. Even though the apostles were disciples, they were also apostles. You and me are disciples of Christ. We're learners of Christ, right? We sit at his feet. We study his word. We understand who he is. We have this relationship with him. We are considered disciples of Christ. So everyone, the multitudes of Jews that had come to Christ are considered disciples. So this is who he's after. He's after everyone who claims the name of Jesus. And so, and he went to the high priest. So he goes to Caiaphas. That may have been why he was there when Stephen shows up and all of that's going on. But he appeals to the high priest and asks him, I need letters. I need you to give me an official letter as leader of Judaism, that I can have a letter allowing me to go to Damascus, to the synagogues. Now, those are kind of outposts. They were like little temples, so to speak. They were teaching assemblies, and they were dotted around the countryside because not everybody could get to the temple. You would go to the synagogue and you would have church. It was like satellite kind of a thing. And so so that if he found anyone belonging to the way, right? If he found anyone that was naming the name of Jesus and trying to say he was resurrected and he's Lord and all that silliness, men or women, he didn't care. He might bring them bound to Jerusalem. I'm dragging them here. Now, this is where he is. This is on what he's doing. He's heading to Damascus now. That's up toward his home territory. He's heading north out of Jerusalem. He's on the road to Damascus, right? Now, as he went on his way, verse 3, it says, he approached Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven shone around him. Now, Paul will tell us in Acts 22 and 26, as he speaks, he tells us a little more detail about this. He tells us that it was noonday. So it's in the middle of the day. The sun is out. It's bright. Brighter than the sun. Listen, if the sun is bright, you go, oh man, what was that? It must have been the sun. No. This light was nothing like the sun. This wasn't to be confused. The sun was already out. It's the middle of the day. It's straight up above them. It's not like, oh wow, the sun came behind a cloud and it blinded them. No. What happened here? What does he say? A light from heaven shone around them. All of a sudden, they are encompassed. It's like they got thrown into the middle of a fire and there's a ring of it around them. The light shone around him. Now, falling to the ground, he heard a voice say to him. Now, before we get to that, though, I want you to understand that in Acts 22 and 26, it says that everybody with him, right? It's not by himself. It's not like, oh, there he is on his little horse heading to Damascus, No. He's got an entourage. He's got people who are with him, and these are the ones who are going to start going house to house. He's got an army, really, literally, like a small army with him. They all fall down. That's what he says when he's relaying this story to Agrippa when he's standing before him. And so he's explaining to him that everybody fell down. They get up. Paul's still on the ground. So the light is shown. Everyone's knocked to the ground. Reminds me of when they tried to arrest him in the Jesus in the garden, and he kind of flashed them. They said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am." And when he said, "I am," it was like he just ripped the flesh off so they could see the glory of God, and they were thrown back. Right. This is kind of what's going on here. And so now the others get up, but Saul has now been isolated. It's he and God. The others hear of a sound. They hear noise. But they don't hear the language. They don't hear the word that Saul hears. This is a unique situation where God is speaking to, not unique to the world, one man. It was to that situation. He had zeroed in on Saul. God always gets his man. And so he zeroed in on Saul. And here's what it says. And Jesus gives this familiar double name. Remember? Martha, Martha. Right? That's a statement of a little weary compassion, right? Martha, Martha. How many times do I have to say this to you, right? Simon, Simon, right? Now he says, Saul, Saul. There's not a sense of madness. There's no anger with God towards Saul, right? He's just simply saying, Saul, Saul, why are you doing this foolishness, man? It's this weary burden, so to speak. Not that the Lord wearies, but I'm putting it in human terms. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Why are you persecuting me? Now, in truth, Jesus is in heaven at the right hand of the Father. Stephen just saw him. What does he mean by that? The same thing he means when he separates the sheep from the goats. When you did it to the least of these, you did it unto me. Do you understand what the world persecutes us? Jesus sees that as persecuting him. Just let that thought sink in. He has lumped himself, married himself to us so that when we are cared for, he is cared for. When he is hurt, we are hurt. Understand that? He encompasses everything about what's going on in our life. This is powerful truth that you see as we just read this narrative. So there's just light around. Saul's on the ground. The others heard the sound of the noise but couldn't distinguish the words. Saul on the ground says this, who are you, Lord? Now, it's a little telling that you're saying, who are you, Lord? You already knew Saul. You knew he was the Lord, right? I mean, you knew that. That's why you said Lord. Who are you, Master? Right? He knew that this was not anything else other than God Most High. Now, I love the fact that Stephen and Saul both saw Jesus, right? One on his way out. I see the Lord standing at the right hand of the Father who's seated. And then he said, and remember what Stephen's dying words, Father, forgive them. Now, he's in heaven. You don't think that Jesus heard his words, didn't forget them. And so here he does exactly what Stephen had prayed for. He's forgiving Saul. And so you find this issue where it's just an amazing contrast of things. Now, he says, why are you persecuting me? And he says, who are you, Lord? Now, Saul knew all about the coming of the Messiah. He knew that. He knew the Messiah was going to come. He just didn't think Jesus was it. Now he's having an awakening and realizes, oh, wow. Jesus was the Messiah. Here he is, having stopped me in my tracks, told me to stop persecuting him. Now listen to what he says. And he said, I am Jesus whom you're persecuting, but rise and enter the city and you'll be told what you are to do. God has his men everywhere. This is what I love about this. Just like we saw, Philip and the eunuch and all of those things, how these divine appointments take place. It's the same thing here. We see that God has already known that he was going to meet Saul on this road. And he also knew that he's got a man named Ananias who's going to be in Damascus, who's going to also, now Ananias doesn't really know that yet, and he's going to freak a little bit when God tells him, hey, I've got Saul, the persecutor. Yeah, he's coming to you. I want you to take care of him, right? But God does these things. God uses you and me to accomplish his purpose. And that's what's going on here. So he says, but rise into the city and you will be told what you are to do. The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one. Saul rose from the ground, and although his eyes were opened, he saw nothing. Saul is blinded by this deal, and he will remain blind for a minute, right? So he can't see anything, but he saw Jesus, and he heard the voice, but he can't see anything. He's blinded. And so here he is heading to Damascus to destroy the way. And now he's an invalid of some sense, going because he has need of the way. I love how God just does things like this. So they led him by the hand and brought him in, because he was already in Damascus. He saw the city. That's what he says. You see the fortress around it, and you see the walls, and you go, hey, we're here. So now they're just going to walk him right into the city. And for 3 days he was without sight, and neither ate nor drank. Now, what happened to those 3 days? We'll surmise tomorrow. Man, Lord bless you guys. Have a great day. I can't wait to share the rest of this story with you tomorrow. Lord willing, I'll see you then.